Hey guys, Daniel here from the Renovation Brothers, and welcome to our second segment of our weekly podcast. Today, I'm honored to be joined by some of the top real estate agents in the LA market. I'm joined with Matan and Kevin. They are from the agency. I'm sure you probably have seen the hit show Buying Beverly Hills. If you have not met them, they are here to answer all your real estate pressing questions. Today, guys, we want to talk about a little bit the correlation between the real estate market and, of course, the world of construction. The two are going hand in hand, and we would like to address some of the topics that you might come up with, some of the topics that you might think about, that you might not even see how the two are related. And today we will address some of those questions. Today we will address some of the things that you might not understand. And hopefully some of that information will help you pivot through the market and the current condition, and will educate you about how to make a more informative decision as you are progressing to buy, sell, or remodel your home. So guys, again, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate that. And I want to get started with both of you. It has been an absolutely hectic market the last year. Interest rates skyrocketed. It made the environment a little bit scary for everyone. People are still on the sidelines, and those who do want to buy definitely complain about the high interest rate. Where do we see 2024, especially since we're coming towards the end of the year? Do we think we're going to have a little bit of an adjustment, and how is it going to impact housing prices as a whole?
So we talked about this a little bit before we started shooting, which is I really don't think it's predicated on a year. I think it's predicated on the Fed and what they do with the rates.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people agree, and certainly we all three agree, that once the Fed reduces their interest rates, even to 6%, the floodgates are going to open and more people are going to go into the market. And I think if you're a buyer right now and you're timing yourself on what to do and where to be, I think you should have cash ready to go. And I think that if you see interest rates drop and you're dependent on those interest rates dropping, you make a move very quickly. Because once the floodgates open, you're going to see a massive increase in pent-up demand that's already existing, but people will actually be able to afford to buy.
So, Kevin, I want to ask you, with interest rate adjustment, we had that situation happen during COVID when interest rates were basically dropped to almost historically low. And that created this craze of people who really want to buy a home, and those who did have a home leveraged the now low interest rate to be able to refinance and do a lot of things for home improvement projects. Now, I feel like a little bit it's a double-edged sword in a sense. Yes, interest rate will come down, but more people will flood the market, which in essence will create a bidding war. Is that kind of the correct way to think about it?
Yeah, I certainly think we're going to see more multiple offers on properties. And in fact, we've even seen it for really good homes that are priced well during this market. I think I read the other day around 40% of people have a rate at or below 3%, another 20% under 4.5%, and then the rest actually own their home free and clear. So the motivation for a lot of people to sell their property is not really focused on having to sell. It's more so wanting to sell. They either want to upgrade to something larger, they want to pull equity out and buy something smaller and take that cash and repurpose it elsewhere. But I agree with a lot of what Matan said. And it's funny because I think during COVID, everyone just wanted a house. Everyone was spending more time at house. The purposes of living were just a little bit different. People wanted outdoor space. They weren't going into the office. They needed at-home offices and things of that nature. And everyone was just like, okay, if I can afford to buy a house, I'm going to do it. And now when we've seen this sort of recession, I think everyone's more so an expert in the field, right? So it's the whole psychology of people feeling like, oh, why would you buy a house? Interest rates are 6 or so percent, right? Or 7%, or even in some cases, I just closed on a property and my client got it in the high 9s.
Wow.
Yeah, a little extreme, but she got a good deal. And the reality is that when you have more free time, the whole psychology of like, why would you buy a house? Everyone just becomes an expert on it. But the reality is when those people purchased during COVID and everyone thought they were paying extreme prices for their homes, they're actually sitting on equity right now because prices went up. Some markets obviously affected more so, like, more vacation markets like Santa Barbara or Palm Springs or, Big Bear, things like that. But in LA, I think you're really well insulated. So I think when rates go down, we're going to see a big boom, and a lot of buyers are going to come out of the woodworks, and we're probably going to see a lot more multiple offers on properties.
So one of the questions that, as somebody who often follows financial markets, and for those who don't know, my background is actually in investment banking a long time ago, before I became a general contractor. So I still follow as part of my, day-to-day routine, financial markets and everything. And some of the things that I often hear, and I kind of tend to agree, and I'm really curious to hear about your perspective, is the common sense is if you need to buy a house, and if you found a house that you love, get it now and refinance later. The question is, for those who may be scared to enter the market, or they feel like perhaps they cannot afford it, that's more important. The not the scarcity, but the fear of getting into this high payment, because now the dollar that you earn cannot do as much as it was before. Do you still believe that statement is accurate? Do you still believe that if you can afford a house, buy it today and refinance later?
Honestly, I fully believe that. Buying a house is such a big decision that usually you're going to consult a lot of people, your family, your partner, whatever that might be, and everyone's going to have a conflicting idea on the matter. But I do tell my clients, I'm like, listen, first and foremost, no matter what market we're in, no matter what rates are, let's make sure you love the house. And then you go back to the motivation for why they're actually looking to buy a property. And if you find the right house, I think it's a huge win. And then we're going to do everything we can to help you achieve that. But, it's interesting. If you look back in any 7-year period in Los Angeles, a home is never worth less than what it was 7 years ago.
Yeah.
So I think just with that basic knowledge and with where we're headed and with how much is going into LA, I think that you're probably, I wouldn't say recession proof, but I think that we're, again, well insulated. And I think I also read something that if you look back 8 years, $1 million today, 8 years ago, is equivalent to like $2.2 million. And if you just carry that natural progression, it's kind of scary to think about what, affordability will look like. Yeah. And I tell people, like, almost jokingly, but still seriously, I'm like, listen, in 20 years, I would be terrified to be a first-time home buyer. I would absolutely buy a house as soon as you can. And then, there's a lot of ways to make it more so affordable, whether that's like rate buy downs or, refinancing when rates go down. But if I were, a buyer, I would just try to acquire a property sooner than later.
So
I'll actually touch
Yeah.
and finish that point where it's really fun to look back historically on real estate prices and market activities. We look at 2008, what happened in 2010. Everybody says, I wish I bought in 2010 when the market was at the bottom and nobody was moving.
Right.
And my family actually did purchase our first piece of property in the US in that time period, and we did really well. I think it's going to be a very interesting phenomenon to study this time period, but in a couple of years, let's say 5 years, because I think this is actually the last great time to get a deal in California, in LA, but maybe in the United States. And the reason I say that is there are so many deals that people are just afraid to go and hunt for. There are sellers that won't reduce their price, but they want to sell. They want to move the property. And it's interesting when buyers that do come out of the woodwork and actually negotiate, it's not just about getting them the best deal, but you can get a phenomenal deal. You can get hundreds of thousands of dollars off of an asking price if you just shoot your shot right now. And if you look at, you talked about psychology earlier. So the psychology of a buyer during COVID was everybody's buying a home. This is my last chance. I have to get it. And everybody bought.
I want to know of, especially in the city of LA, if we all of a sudden have this massive amount of supply. Now there's a ton of inventory. Do you feel like it's going to shift the perspective of the buyer? Do you think like prices might adjust? No, you might say, I don't know. That's also...
I mean, it all comes down to supply and demand, but I don't think we're going to see an influx of inventory. I really don't, because you got to keep in mind, you got to look at the micro and the macro, and a lot of who I work with are looking for single family houses. I don't think either of us do a lot of commercial. I know you just did commercial, but generally that's not our bread and butter. So like Matan said, if someone's looking in the valley, they're very specifically looking in the valley, and then they're most likely looking in a little sub neighborhood of the valley. And that has, it's not really correlated with commercial in downtown LA or wherever it's at, right? Now, sometimes it does cross-pollinate. Like Woodland Hills, for example, if you got in 2 years ago, you're sitting on a lot of cash right now because everything they just did with the mall. Or if you're looking on the west side, like I know I really like, what is that? Culver City. Downtown Culver City had so much going into it the past couple of years, and it's just automatically, it pollinates to other little sub-neighborhoods as well. But I don't think we're going to have a supply. I don't think we're going to have too much supply, honestly.
So that really kind of gears me to shift. As we see a lot of development, as we see also a lot of older homes that, are in a great location more than anything. They might not be in the perfect condition, but they are in a perfect location. Do you feel, based on your experience, because I know that as a general contractor, no matter if it's a new construction or a remodel, people always want to do work. And not because perhaps they don't like something. Yes, it has a factor to it, but they just want to make something more customizable to them. Do you feel like, based on your experience and just where you kind of see the wind is shifting with your clientele, people geared more towards the older homes that they feel like it's in a great location, or do you feel like they want to stretch a little bit their dollar and maybe get a new construction that, for that matter, might not need as much work, and they might get, more for their dollar?
It's a really good question. I think it depends. I mean, I think for Brentwood and Palisades and Cheviot, Beverly, like the west side, you have these major builders that have come through and done, 100 houses a year, and they're all very similar modern farmhouse, just like Studio City, Sherman Oaks, Encino, and that's getting a little played out. And, when we're working with developers, because we like to be very involved from the beginning phases, like, not so much with like permits and stuff like that, although we can, but more so like the design inspiration, just because we know what buyers are looking for, because we work with a lot of buyers, and what's selling. And I try to advise people kind of going against modern farmhouse. I mean, there's a way of doing it where it's going to be timeless, but sometimes you do it a little bit too contemporary, and contemporary literally means right here in that moment. And then what you find is, if it's a big marquee listing that takes a year or two to sell, in 2 years, the house feels a little bit dated.
Yeah.
Right? So it really depends on the buyer. I know I'm working with several right now that are looking for that more older charm, and they just want something that's really fresh, organic, and that they can renovate themselves. And honestly, when working with buyers, if they have the budget to remodel, or if they have the budget to buy new, I usually let them know that, hey, if you're buying new, you're probably going to pay a premium. And if you go to sell this in a year or so, you're not really going to make money on it, because you're buying something that's literally brand new and there's a premium attached to that. Whereas if you buy something that's older, as long as you get it for a good price and you're doing renovations that are attainable, you're probably going to instantly do the sweat equity and have a lot of money in your property.
So we did talk about it, and actually we almost got one, you and I, and that was, if you do go new construction, there's also timing associated with new construction. And I want, the viewers to kind of hear from you. If you do consider new construction, when is the right timing to get new construction?
It's a great question. So we did. You almost bought a new construction house from me that you probably will make money on. If you're buying in planned development areas where this entire neighborhood is having a collection of, say, 18 to 20 to 30 houses that are all going to be brand new, if you get in phase one, you're going to make money on it, because what they do is, these production builders, they're not custom builders, they're production builders. They're going to release them in different phases. So phase one is going to be at an entry-level price point. They're just kind of testing the waters. Once they sell out of those, then they're going to increase the prices by, say, 5 to 10% and so forth. And then what happens is, all of those new homes just generally bring in more commercial investment to the neighborhood, where you're going to have Starbuckses, you're going to have, grocery stores and stuff like that. And now you have this new construction neighborhood that you were very early in, and you're sitting on equity.
Yeah. And in turns, a lot of the time you can use that equity, if you play it right, you can use that equity to be able to then do some further improvements, and not immediately, maybe down the line, maybe as interest rate improve a little bit, and you do decide to refinance, you can pull some of the cash out. You can then, that point, especially if it's a tract home, because most new construction tend to be tract homes, unless it's from a developer who does a full type of remodel or build, and then you can do all of the other things.
But even so, the basic finishes that these production builders offer are pretty bad. You're going to want to redo everything for the most part.
Yeah, that's usually low quality, because they have to buy it in a mass scale in order to keep their costs down, in order to be able to maximize their profits. Otherwise, they're just not going to meet based on today's interest rate environment and everything.
The one thing I was just going to add to that, because I do think it's really important, is that with new construction, brand new construction in Los Angeles or California, you get statutory 10-year warranty. So first year is fit and finish. Anything that pops up in that house, whether it's a loose handle to your toilet is, loose, they're going to come through and fix it. And then it stretches all the way out to the 10th year, which is like structurally and foundationally, the developer's on the hook for it. So for a lot of people who they want that peace of mind, knowing that everything's going to be in working condition, and if not, the developer's going to come out and fix it, new construction has a lot of benefits that you won't necessarily get if you're doing a remodel.
And of course, the other thing to add to that is also most of new development today is built to today's code. So that's another piece of mind to know, is the fact that, your insulation is usually higher a rating. Most new construction nowadays have to come with solar panels and renewable energy as part of Title 24 requirements. So those are some of the caveats that for somebody who is considering buying a new home, it's like a great benefit of knowing that you're getting a home that is a little bit more. Now, I do want to touch a little bit on some of those misplaced terminology. We always hear those kind of terms, those words, but I feel like a lot of people don't know what those means. And I'm saying that because a lot of the time you guys call us to come and help during inspection period. We have contingencies, we have escrow in general. So I want to run with you down those list of kind of terminology and help break it down, dumb it down to the average person. What is it means, and how can a buyer leverage that in today's world to their advantage? So let's start with the most ambiguous one, is escrow. What is escrow? What is it designed for? And what really use we have out of it?
Perfect. So escrow, a lot of people get confused because there's escrow as a company and then there's escrow as a process. So the escrow company assists in the escrow process. It's really important to distinguish the two because us agents will sort of just intertwine those words together. The escrow process is the moment you get a contract signed up until that moment that the money is dispersed and the person buys the house and the seller gets the money out of it. That's an entire escrow process. Sometimes it's very simple, some documents, transfer of title, and sometimes it's very complex. A lot of inspections, due diligence, buyers and sellers still negotiating throughout it. And the escrow company is a neutral third party that helps basically mediate that transaction. So money flows through the escrow company, paperwork flows through the escrow company. They are the ones that are going to actually record that sale with the county clerk. And so that makes it official. Everything is handled through the escrow company, through the escrow process, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. So in essence, it's a third party neutral to be able to transfer between literally the property and, on the other hand, the cash that basically is being transferred from the lender or the individual buyer.
Correct.
Now, during the escrow period, which I understand the standard is usually 30 days.
Sure.
On average. A lot of the time, the prospective buyers have what they call inspections. So it's inspection period, in a sense. And during the inspection period, or I should say, the prospective buyer can ask for credits. They can have contingencies as part of it. So I want to break the two apart. First of all, what are contingencies? Because I feel like it's a very vague terminology. And then what is the process of, as part of the contingencies, what is the process of credits and obtaining those? Because I feel like something we discussed, a lot of people think you're literally ending a check.
Yeah, it's a little different. It's easier to materialize if you say it like this. It's a contingency of sale. Any contingency that you put in a contract means that until that contingency is lifted, whatever that is, and we'll dive into the specifics of contingencies in a second, that buyer or that seller is not fully committed to the sale, meaning they have an out. They can back out of that deal per that contingency. So the most common contingency is the physical inspection contingency. what does that mean? Let's say I would go up buy a house from you, but I don't know how the foundation looks like. I don't know how the roof looks like. There's many things that I haven't quite investigated yet when I decide that, hey, I want to go pursue purchasing it. So it's not like I go to the mall and buy a piece of clothing. When I run my credit card and I say I'm going to buy it, it's over. Maybe I can have a 30-day refund or whatever. It's different with real estate. I have the exclusive right to purchase your property with my contingencies that protect me. So for example, I'll have that 14-day period where I can go and hire any inspector, any contractor that I want to verify the condition of that property for me. And if I decide, hey, look, this is a huge fix. I didn't know that it was going to be this crazy. There's $100,000 in repairs. I've got a few options as a buyer. I can renegotiate. I can say, hey, you better pay me $100,000 as a credit, or I'm backing out of the deal. I could say, hey, Mr. Seller, it's $100,000. You and I split it 50-50 and we'll sign off on it and we'll remove the contingency. Or you could say, yeah, I'm still getting a good deal and I'm willing to take the deal, even though I know these repairs. But now that I know that it's nothing more serious than that and I know what I'm buying, I'm willing to release that contingency and move forward. So, and sellers have contingencies as well, but essentially speaking, it's a contingency of sale. And until you release those, you're not fully committed to the deal. A non-contingent sale means that as soon as you write that contract and you send the earnest money deposit in escrow, you're on the hook for the property.
So Kevin, I want to ask you how often it happens that perhaps somebody wants to buy a home, they conduct an inspection, and there might be things that are on the inspection or not fully on the inspection, and then after purchase there are more things that coming up. Is that often can happen?
You're saying like they buy a house and then a week after they close, their AC stops working?
Something like that, which technically should have like been inspected in...
Honestly, it happens more often than I would like to admit. 2 cases that happened this year. One's buyer purchased a condo. They did an HVAC inspection. Everything's all fine. And then they realized the HVAC stopped working like several months after they purchased it. They went in, they fully inspected inside the unit, and they found a bunch of mold. And that's more so like an invasive inspection inside of the unit that they would have never called during the due diligence period. Another example, whenever we had that heat wave that came through, my client's AC stopped working, and it's simply because the heat was just too much for the AC unit. And, we had it inspected and we went back and referenced the inspection reports. And unfortunately, like at that time, it was inspecting well. But listen, that's just part of home ownership, and every agent needs to educate their buyers that, listen, when you purchase a home, you will have things that come up. It's inevitable. Even new construction, we do full-on inspections, which honestly is a little bit better because when you're purchasing a new construction home, you do inspections. There's going to be so many things that pop up, but it's expected the developer's going to fix everything, right? So you get that kind of peace of mind.
So who would you say, kind of like, who are your go-to people? You found your dream home, you and your agents are starting the process. You say, let's go for it. As part of your, inspections, who are the people who you want on your corner to be able to give you the peace of mind that this is the right purchase?
That's a great question. I think every agent needs to have an arsenal of just great vendors that they use. And we have a very well thought out vendor list that we are very strict on who we allow on that list. And mainly you want to work with people that are reliable, which is obviously why I think we built our relationship, is because a lot of contractors are just not reliable. You are. And we've done this for many years. So we've worked with people that we know are reliable and that are going to do a good job. The other thing, and I can't stress this enough, is with inspectors, you have some inspectors that are specialists on certain areas. So you have like general inspectors that can kind of do everything generally. But when it comes to foundation or roof or chimney or sewer, things of that nature, they're not necessarily specialists in that matter. So you want to have like a little subcategory of your specialists in case you need to get them out there. And also, you don't want to work with alarmists. All of our inspectors, they're not alarmists. And the difference between calling out issues and being an alarmist is an alarmist just tries to kill the deal. And there's been inspectors that we specifically stopped working with because, they will just call something out and they will advise the buyer not to buy the home, but it's not really just cause. And we'll have separate contractors come out and inspectors come out and they'll totally disagree with what that one person said, which most likely puts them in that category of like, they're a little alarming.
Can I touch on that?
Yeah.
As well? A lot of the times when we get inspectors that come out, they give us bogus bids because they're hoping that the buyer buys the property and then uses them for the construction. A lot of times what we do with our inspections is we actually get the contractors to give us a bid on the work. And so if it's a $5,000 issue that somebody bids me $15,000, I'm going to be pissed because I know that somebody else that I've worked with knows that that's not a real issue. My buyer has a report that says it's going to cost $15,000. They might still buy the house and then use that contractor for the bid. So when it comes down to being an alarmist, I think that's the true reason why if you've been inspecting chimneys for 20 years and you're a chimney contractor, you just understand everything there is to know about a chimney. You know if it's serious or not. So if you're going to be an alarmist, it's because you're going to give an inflated bid just because that's what you do. So that's really what we try to watch out for, is not people that aren't truthful and factual, because that's extremely important for the client. We want to give the client as much information as possible, but we don't want to give them bogus bids, right? That's just going to concern them and freak them out, just so that this contractor can, overcharge for a piece of work.
Yeah. So that's actually leads me to a very interesting, because I do come to a lot of your, inspections.
We love having you by.
And I get to see a lot of the clients before. I see their enthusiasm. I see their initial visions, and they're kind of like walking a fine line between a fear of, God, I'm entering into this new property. I might need to put additional money. So a couple of things that I want to ask you. Do you feel like, as a rule of thumb, any homeowner or prospective homeowner who is about to buy a house should have what I call emergency cushion money for repairs as part of their purchase? Or do they kind of like need to count on the fact that whoever the seller is will give them credit? What do you see the mentality in the market is? I'm coming from the mindset, and it's, again, as somebody who purchased multiple properties, yes, you can say I'm a contractor, so it's easier because I'm coming with the understanding of if it's indeed a big deal or not big deal. But I'm in the mindset of, like, I always come and I say, okay, no matter what, I need to have at least extra 10%. Again, this for me. Just set aside that I know that no matter what's going to happen, I'm ready for this. And I don't want to be caught with my, underwear, below my knees and surprised in the sense of, like, what am I going to do now? So I'm curious to know if you feel like that's the same type of mentality that you think clients should have, or is it a little bit different in the sense that, expectations should come from the seller? We want to provide our clients with a good functioning, good home, and it's not should be the responsibility of the client to worry about those things.
Well, this goes back to what Kevin said earlier. Even if you inspect the home and everything checks out, you're always going to have issues pop up. So as a homeowner, regardless if it's a condo or a single family, you're a homeowner and you're responsible. So having that cushion is a given. I think you can't go into a situation where you're going to have to spend extra money and you know that you're going to spend extra money and not have that cushion. What we spoke about earlier with the leverage that buyers have right now to squeeze a little bit more out of sellers, I think you should get the sellers to pay for that extra 10% cushion. And you're able to in this type of market. People weren't able to do it in COVID because you were overbidding. You were going non-contingent on your offers, paying above everybody else. You were doing escalation clauses, which is a whole nother topic. And now you finally have the opportunity, and I think it's going to be the last real opportunity of this generation of home buyers to have the seller pay for that additional 10%. I think once the tide turns and interest rates drop, you're going to be competing again, and then all that goes out the window.
So before we go to the cosmetic aspect, everyone is somebody who just does so much volume with regards to interior remodel. By far, interior remodel is, I would say, the majority of our business. It's the things that people visually see: the kitchens, the bathrooms, the floor, the paint, removing the walls, open concepts, is the things that we get to see more often. But I want to ask you guys, what do you feel is something that most clients nowadays seek for? Is they seek for the finished product, or they seek for the raw bones with the mindset of, I can make that into my vision and my reality?
Sure. It's a great question. Honestly, I think it's both. I certainly have clients that just don't have that vision, and they do not want to see anything that requires work. And I think anytime I'm with them and I'm like, oh, this is a great house, I'll FaceTime you so you can talk some sense into them. But it's the reality of it. A lot of times younger buyers don't have that vision. We certainly have a lot of investors, because a lot of people right now are sitting on cash, and their cash is working hard for them, whatever you're getting in interest rates, whatever. But people want to see that that money go work for them. So they're looking at investment properties. And because we've been looking, inventory is pretty tight, So if you find a good offering that has some meat on the bone, you're most likely going to be competing with other people. One aspect of a house that I will say, and I know this is kind of switching gears a little bit, that a lot of people mislook, and I think that it's a big mistake, especially developers, is the exterior space. Good landscaping will completely sell a house.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
Without a doubt.
Can I add to that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Most of the time, and we're just talking Zillow because that's what the consumer uses.
Right.
The first photo on Zillow is of the exterior. And Zillow is like Instagram, it's like TikTok, it's like all these other apps. When a buyer is going on Zillow, it's flip, 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 and you have to capture their attention with the first photo. And that goes into getting a good photographer. It's another thing. But if your landscaping is shit, or you just have a weird how you haven't painted it, or the roof is falling off, or something in the yard is sticking out, like people really don't continue to slide through the photos, even if you have a great lot, even if you have a great interior. So I completely agree with you. That frontage of the house is super important. And it's also the first impression that people get when they come to an open house or a showing.
Absolutely. And I kind of want to now take exactly what you just said, Matan, and tie it in as we conclude our episode today. The population is aging. Our parents are aging, and as prices getting higher, and that's something that technically California is battling a shortage of housing, and as part of that, and high interest rate, and prices going up. And Kevin, you mentioned that I can't even imagine what in 20 years from now the market is going to be like. I feel like the realization that nowadays families are going to pretty much live together by maybe subdividing the lot, adding ADU. Do you feel like this is the new reality? Do you feel like we are moving into a place where we're going to be closer more than ever to our families because they cannot afford maybe, or our children for that matter, because the parents probably bought the house a long time ago when it was affordable, and now the kids cannot afford the place. So the parents are forced at that point to not really kicking their kids out. For that matter, they're just kicking out to their remodeled garage, to the garage. So going back to the importance of the backyard, the landscaping, the importance of making sure that your lot is fully used. I believe that nowadays that's really the reality that people should consider, is the fact of the adding value by converting maybe their garage or adding a structure on their lot if possible to be able to combat that high price increase.
Yeah, I say that certainly is an issue. What I have a hard time, I've certainly sold a lot of houses that have an ADU in the backyard. And at a certain price point, you not only look at what the condition of the house is, you look at the amenities. Does it have a 2-car garage? Does it have a pool? Does it have an ADU? What's the lot size? And it's almost expected at a certain price point that you will have an ADU, especially for newer construction. But the issue that I find a lot is if you're not actually using that for family members, very seldomly at this, I would probably say north of $2.5 million, no one's going to rent that out because you don't actually need that money. And plus with safety concerns, a lot of people are like, I would rather just not have someone I don't know living in my backyard. So it's interesting to see, on the flip side, I have a client whose mom lives with her and she just got married. She wants to have kids. And she's like, I need a house with an ADU because right now the mom lives in the main house and you want that type of separation. Or if you have nannies or maids that stay overnight, it's really nice to have, but it's all about just what the buyer's preference is.
Now, California has changed the regulation, and for those of you who don't know, California has come with a solution to, again, combat housing shortage, enabling homeowners not just to have the ability to add an ADU, they're also talking about the factor of adding a multi-unit detached structure in the back of your lot, if, of course, the setbacks permits that. But one step further is now you can, as a homeowner, sell that detached property separately to your main house, to your main property. So in essence, you have your house, and all of a sudden, to make money, you selling that, or you can either sell it to 2 different families, or you sell it to somebody different. How will people react to this?
Generally, I don't prefer it. I don't think it's great. I think it's, if you're an investor or developer and you pick up this property for a steal and you build this ADU or you do a detached garage conversion, it makes sense. You're probably going to get more juice out of the squeeze if you sell them separately. But if you live there and you need the money and you sell that property, down the line when you go to sell your main house that you still live in, it's not going to be as highly valued because you essentially have someone sharing your backyard with you that you have no control over. And I think a whole different topic, but it's a whole psychology of like people in this generation, like over collateralizing like all of their debt and then just saying like, oh, pay for it later down in life, whatever. But, you know, we haven't seen it become an issue yet, but I think probably in the future it will. What do you think?
I'm pretty opinionated on this, and I don't think that it's a good idea for the higher end in California, even something like $1.5 million plus. You got to look at the psychology of why people buy a home in the first place, because anybody can go rent a house that they have their backyard and their pool, and they probably have a little bit more flexibility. I mean, there's so many, pros to renting. So why would someone buy? They want control. They want privacy. They don't want a landlord to tell them what to do. And they want to have an asset that's fixed and that they control. You kind of lose a lot of that when you have a neighbor that is in your physical property, but owns their property or their side outright. The next buyer that's going to come to your property when you want to sell it in 5 or 10 years, you're losing half of the available buyers just because that's an ick for people. They don't want to live with somebody else that's been there, and you really have no control over who's in your backyard. So I think you lose a lot of buyers by doing that. I think some developers can make a lot of money by being the first ones to just sell them off separately and maybe add a couple $100,000 to their price. But I think if you're buying into that, it's not a good idea.
Yeah, and then the only thing I can think about is the conflicts that can arise between the two. You're in such a proximity that you just feel like...
And it's not a tenant. They own that property.
Literally.
A tenant, you have a dispute, okay, you can handle it, and it's probably a little more complicated in California to kick out a tenant, but it can be done. If somebody owns a property, it's different.
It's most likely going to be a tenant, but not your tenant. It's going to be someone that purchased that for, let's say, $400,000 or $500,000, stuck a tenant in there, is doing short-term rentals, and you're dealing with that massive headache.
Again,
I love that.
It goes back to not having control of your own property, which is one of the sole reasons that people purchase property, right? So I think if that becomes a trend, I don't think that a lot of people will pick up on it. I just don't think that people want to spend millions of dollars to not have that control over their space.
So as somebody, obviously, kind of to conclude today, first of all, again, I want to say thank you. So much golden nuggets, so much information that is valuable. But I want to ask you, as somebody, again, who works in the world of construction and remodeling, what do you see that homeowners appreciate the most? What part of the house would you say, this is the selling point? Of course, everyone's taste is different. And literally last week, we had over here one of the LA's biggest and premier developers. And he said that he thinks that, for example, staircases are one of the things that are often overlooked. But in his opinion, it's something that he puts a lot of attention to because it's one of the first things that you see. And he feels like if stairs are done properly, can literally gravitate a lot of buyers towards the home.
I agree with staircases is a big one. For me, it's light and it's space. If you can open up a property correctly, let's say you're doing a flip, you're not doing ground up because you have a little bit more flexibility. But if you can walk into a flip and say, I'm going to open this up. This is not load bearing. I can get rid of this room. I can double the space in the yard, whatever it is. A buyer that walks into that brand new house and sees so much more light, so much more space, that's a big, big plus for them. And I see that a lot. I see buyers walk into properties and they just feel squished. They just say it's too small or there's not a lot of light. I think if you can combat those two, you'll do really well.
Mine would probably be the floors. I think it covers the most surface area, and I cannot stand ugly floors.
It's so interesting you say that. For me, for example, I know I mentioned that last week as well, because we were talking about signature. What is your signature? In that case, it was a developer, and I wanted to know what was their signature. And for me, for example, it's something that I feel is not talked as often, especially in today's advancement of technology, ability of a house to be a smart home. I feel like it's a huge selling point. If I come into a house, and in my case, for us, it's a standard. We like to do that as part of a standard remodel. But if I can take my phone and I know that I can control the thermostat and I can control the lights in every room and I can control, my garage. So in case I have Amazon delivery, I can know that they're, especially in today's theft, I have, going back to again, retaining control. Smart homes is something that I feel like is so overlooked, and not as much clients even know about it.
Even the ability, and I tell clients this all the time, especially for like homes that are smart homes, they're usually a little bit higher price point. And I say, you most likely travel a lot. If you're out of town and, with the whole safety and burglaries and so forth, you can turn lights on and off to make it appear that you're home, right? When you're not. Or like you just land at LAX, you want to turn the AC on, you want to heat up the jacuzzi. Like that's what I mean, that's a good life right there.
Yeah. So for me, I feel like if I was a prospective buyer, and I don't see that as much. I come to a lot of your inspections, and I just don't see it as much incorporated.
You can overdo it though, because I remember showing a house, and I think this was up in Bel Air, and beautiful house, and it had a magnetic door. I'm sure you've probably seen a lot like that too. And we got stuck trying to open the door, trying to leave the house, something like that. And my buyer specifically was like, I will never buy a house like this for this reason. If your electricity goes out, obviously there's got to be like some emergency, whatever, but you couldn't just turn a handle or unlock it. You had to, it was magnetic, it was weird. So, I mean, you can overdo it.
Yeah.
But I think the basic concept of a smart home that we're discussing is having everything on your app. I actually agree with you. It's you can really overdo it. You also have to think in terms of 5, 10, 15 years down the line, like where technology is going to be. Everybody's going to have a smartphone. You're selling to people that, 20, 30 years ago, smartphones weren't a thing. So maybe those buyers are still around and they're still alive. But 10, 15 years down the line, everybody's going to want everything on their phone immediately.
Yeah.
And so you're not building home for tomorrow. You're building them for years down the line. And smart homes, I completely agree with you.
And that's a whole subsection of the construction industry, is literally integration of technology into home construction. Well, guys, I want to say again, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for shedding light about, the real estate industry, especially in the LA market, and how it ties in the construction world. Hopefully, guys, you got a lot of, helpful nuggets. Hopefully, you got a little bit more information. Again, those two studs are perhaps the best real estate agents that LA can have. And I am honored to work side by side with them as a contractor to help their clients and just to see how they take care of their clients. So if you need to buy or sell your home, please don't think twice. We will leave their social media handles. We will leave their contact information. Feel free to reach out. And we often work together. So know that usually it's you will get a package deal. So you will know that you are in good hands. So if you have any questions, and last things actually you want to add?
No, I'll just say the same thing about you. It's very, very rare to find such a dedicated contractor who's truthful, who's always on point, always shows up, and we really appreciate working with you. I think Kevin and I both really, really just love working with you, and again, appreciate you having us on as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, I want to add that because it's worth it. Daniel, I think I put in touch with probably like 30, 40 agents by now, and some really big agents. And immediately after they meet with Daniel the first time, they text me and say, dude, Daniel's amazing. He's great. He made me look good. And I can just say, someone who cares about that side of the business, your relationship with agents, it's really refreshing. And I think you're doing an amazing job.
By the way, if you're a contractor watching this and you're not in Los Angeles, because if you're in Los Angeles, I don't know if you could beat this guy, but building relationships with agents is so critical to your business. If you want referrals coming left and right, and you don't have to think about marketing, do what Daniel does, which is show up, have a great attitude, and really help agents. And we don't want to think about our contractor list and who to call. We just want to say, hey, go talk to my guy, go talk to my girl. This is the person you want to talk to about your home, about renovations, and we have that easy transition and handoff. And then Daniel makes us look really good. So if you're a contractor, any place outside of LA, that's what you should be doing, building relationships with agents.
And I think as a whole, as a market, that's something that you're so spot on, is the fact that now it's a teamwork.
Absolutely.
It's not anymore a one-man show, because clients, lifestyle is so busy, and you just want a team a one-stop shop, a place where you know I'm being taken care of. So guys, again, if you have any questions, we're always here. Every week we will try to give you a little bit more information that's something to pertain to, again, the construction, the remodeling, and the world of real estate as a whole. Until the next time, guys, take care.